Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chel Gimel and Mir Hashem. Today, we will be learning Daf Yud Amud Beis and concluding Siman Reish Mem Vav. Our learning today should be a schus of her refuah shalema for Bracha Tova Bas Leah, who is in need of Rachem Shamayim, and also for Achenu Kol Beis Yisrael, Hanasuna Basaru Bashivya Ha'imdim Ben Bayam Ben Bayabasha Hamakayim Yerachem Aleihem VeYetziam Yitzar L'Rvacha Me'afei L'Oira Umishibad L'Geula Hashta Bagala V'Zman Kariv V'Naimar Amen. So, in Mir Hashem today, we're going to tie up Siman Reish Mem Vav, which has been quite an interesting and complex, I would say Siman, but really it's been a sugya. So, in order to see the Ramah and understand the Mishnah Berurahs that conclude the Siman over here, we have to give a brief recap of what we've seen here in Siman Reish Mem Vav since Sif Gimel. We'll try to keep it short and sweet, but we really have to have all of this framed well in our minds to be able to understand the Ramah and the Mishnah Berurah. So back in Sif Gimel, the Mechaber introduced to us the mitzvah of Shvisas Behemtai. What's the mitzvah of Shvisas Behemtai? We know on Shabbos you're not allowed to do malacha, but not only are you not allowed to do malacha, your animals cannot do malacha either. We have this in a pasuk. It's a mitzvah daraisa. It's a pasuk in the Aseres HaDibros. Laman yanuach sharcha v'chamayrecha. You cannot have your behemoths doing malacha on Shabbos. Because of that, the Mechaber told us in Sif Gimel, a Yisrael is not allowed to rent out or lend out his animal to an Eina Yehudi for a period of time that includes Shabbos. Why? Because if the Eina Yehudi has your animal on Shabbos, he may very well do malacha with your animal on Shabbos. You need to be concerned with your mitzvah of Shvisas Behemtai. You don't have to, it's not even you have to know that he's going to do malacha. No, you have to be concerned that he might do malacha with your animal in contravention of the mitzvah of Shvisas Behemtai, and therefore you can't lend it or rent it out to the Eina Yehudi for a term that includes Shabbos. Having said that, the Ramah, and really it's between the lines in the Mechaber as well, gave us a very simple eitzah of what to do if you want to be able to rent out or lend out your behemoth to an Eina Yehudi for a term that includes Shabbos. The simple eitzah, the simple way to get around it would be, give the animal to the Eina Yehudi with a tanai that he must return it to you before Shabbos. So if you want to rent out or lend out your behemoth to an Eina Yehudi for a month, you go ahead, you strike the deal, and you tell him there's one little wrinkle in the deal over here. That wrinkle is every Friday you're going to have to return the animal to me. Okay, this way he has the animal during the week. He could do as much malach as he wants during the week, and you could rest assured no malach is going to be done with your animal on Shabbos because your animal is back home, safe and sound in your barn on Shabbos. Okay. Then the Mechaber gave us in Sif Dalid another possible eitzah, another way you could construct such a rental deal or a lending deal to give your animal to an Eina Yehudi, and you should be able to relieve yourself of any concern of Shvisas Behemtai. What's that eitzah? That eitzah is construct the deal with the Eina Yehudi in a way that the Eina Yehudi accepts upon himself such a high level of achrayus, responsibility for the animal, that halachically we look at the Eina Yehudi as being the owner of the animal, and you are no longer the owner of the animal, therefore you have no concern of Shvisas Behemtai. What does that mean? What level of achrayus does the Eina Yehudi have to accept upon himself? He has to accept upon himself even yukra v'zoyla. What does that mean? He's going to accept upon himself achrayus for the animal, first, the way a normal borrower or renter does. If the animal dies, he's going to replace it. If the animal is stolen, he's going to replace it. But then he's going to accept upon himself an even higher degree of responsibility. What's that? Yukra v'zoyla. He's going to accept upon himself that any change in the value of the animal is going to accrue to him. So, let's say you rented the animal to him, and the animal is worth $1,000. At the end of the term of the rental, you take a look at the commodities market, and now the animal is not worth 1,000. The animal is worth 1,200. Well, that means that you gave him $1,000 animal. He's returning to you a $1,200 animal. You now owe him $200. But it works the other way as well. Let's say you rented the animal to him when it was worth 1,000, and now at the end of the term of the rental, it's only worth 800. The Ein Yehudi is accepting upon himself to give you an additional $200 to make up for the loss of value of the ox. Says the Mechaber at Sif Daled, if you construct the deal with the Ein Yehudi in that way, then halachically we no longer look at you as being the owner of the animal. Now we look at the Ein Yehudi as being the owner of the animal, and therefore you have no concern of Shvisas Behemtai. But in Sif Daled, the Mechaber says there is a Yesh Oimrim that says that this doesn't work. Why? Because the Yesh Oimrim says there's a fatal flaw in this deal. The fatal flaw, the poison pill in this deal is that while it's true that the Ein Yehudi accepted upon himself a very extreme high level of responsibility for the animal, that's not enough to make him the owner. You know why? Because there's one right he does not have. He cannot sell the animal. It's your animal. He can't sell it out from under you. This Yesh Oimrim says, so long as the Ein Yehudi does not have the right to sell the animal, he can't be considered the owner. The Yisrael is still the owner, and therefore the Yisrael still has a concern of Shvisas Behemtai. So again, very, very short and sweet. There's a mitzvah of Shvisas Behemtai. Therefore, there's an issue for Yisrael to rent or lend out his animal to an Ein Yehudi on Shabbos. The simple way to circumvent that is make it tonight that the Ein Yehudi must return the animal before Shabbos. A more complicated eitzah would be construct the deal so that the Ein Yehudi halachically becomes the owner of the animal. How do you do that? You have the Ein Yehudi accept a very high degree of achrayus over the animal. What's the key? The key is he has to accept upon himself yukra v'zayla. He has to accept upon himself that changes in value to the animal will accrue to him. Having said that, there is a Yesh Oimrim that says that even that isn't enough. In order for the Ein Yehudi to be the owner, the Ein Yehudi has to have the right to sell the animal. Since under the terms of this deal, he cannot sell the animal, he cannot be the owner, and there still is a Shvisas Behemtai issue. Then in Sif Hey, the Mechaber went on to discuss another case. Now we have a case where a Yisrael and an Ein Yehudi own an animal b'shutvis. Oh, a Yisrael and Ein Yehudi own an animal b'shutvis. Comes Shabbos, the Ein Yehudi would like to use the animal. But the Yisrael has a 50% stake in the animal. How does the Yisrael allow the Ein Yehudi to do malacha with his 50% of the animal? That would represent, very likely, a Shvisas Behemtai issue. So the Mechaber told us in Sif Hey that, again, first, there's the simple way out. The simple way out is be smart of how you construct this deal. When you go to the animal dealership to go buy the animal together with the Ein Yehudi, construct the deal so that the Ein Yehudi has 100% ownership of the animal on Shabbos, and you, the Yisrael, have 100% ownership of the animal on another day during the week. Tuesday, you own it 100%. Tuesday, he owns it 100% on Shabbos. No problem of Shvisas Behemtai. Everybody gets what they want, and the Yisrael could sleep well at night. That would be the simple way to handle this, and that's the way you're really mechuyev to handle it up front. That's the way you should handle it. Could purchase the animal in such a way that you never have a challenge of Shvisas Behemtai. Having said that, the Mechaber says, let's say you didn't do that. So now, you taka own 50% of the animal on Shabbos, and the Ein Yehudi wants to do malacha. He wants to have the animal on Shabbos, and he wants to have full unfettered use of the animal on Shabbos. Is there a way out? So the Mechaber gives us really three different possibilities. Possibility number one is you take your ownership stake in the animal and you lend it to the Ein Yehudi for Shabbos, behalva gemura. Those are the words of the Mechaber. You lend it to him with a true, bona fide, solid loan. Halva gemura. What does that mean? What's a halva gemura? So the Mechaber spells it out. The Mechaber says what you're going to do is like this. First thing you're going to do is you're going to evaluate the animal. You're going to put a value, a dollar value, to the animal. So you take the animal, you look at the animal, you say, Tony, the animal is worth $1,000? Yes, it's worth $1,000. Okay, if it's worth $1,000, so my 50% stake is worth $500. Yes. I'm lending you my stake in the animal for Shabbos, which means, essentially, I'm lending you $500. That's what I'm doing. I'm really lending you $500. Now, the Eina Yehudi is going to take it, and he is going to accept full achrayus over this animal for Shabbos. Anything that happens on Shabbos is going to be his problem. He's also going to accept upon himself yukra v'zoyla. He's going to accept upon himself any changes in value accrue to him. And there's one more thing that you have to give the Ein Yehudi. You have to also give him the right to sell the animal. So let's be clear. In this eitzah that the Mechaber is giving, the Mechaber is saying, you are going to give the Ein Yehudi your stake in the animal as a halva gemura. He's going to accept full achrayus over the animal. He's going to accept yukra v'zoyla. You're going to be zoikiv bedamim. You placed a dollar value on it, so everybody knows exactly how much money we're dealing with here. And you're going to give him the right to sell the animal. So this will work, even according to the Madiyamar and Sif Dalid, that says that the Ein Yehudi has to have the right to sell the animal in order to be considered the owner. So that's the first eitzah that the Mechaber gives. He says, you bought the animal b'shutvis, you own the animal b'shutvis, the Ein Yehudi wants to have full unfettered use of it on Shabbos. Here's the eitzah. Give it to him b'halva gemura, including yukra v'zoyla, and including that he has the ability to sell it. But then the Mechaber turns around. It says, v'yesh matirim. There are those who are willing to be matir this situation, but you give the Ein Yehudi a little bit less. What are you going to do? Again, you're going to give it to him as a loan. Again, you're going to be zokiv bedamim. You're going to put a dollar value to the loan. Again, he's going to accept full achrayus, including yukra v'zoyla. But he's going to make the animal an apoitiki. What does that mean? He makes the animal an apoitiki. He tells you, look, Ruvain, you're lending me your value in the animal. How could you rest assured that you're going to get your money back? Oh, you see the ox? The ox is going to be an apoitiki. Apoitiki, said the Ramah, means apoitehekoi. This is where you're going to get your money from. At the end of the term of the rental or the loan, when it's time for you to get payback, when it's time for you to collect the loan, you're going to collect the value of the loan from the animal. Now, by virtue of the Ein Yehudi making the animal an apoitiki, he can no longer sell it. So the difference between this yesh matirim and the first eitzah that the Mechaber gave, in the first eitzah, he said halva gemura, including the ability to sell the animal. Now he's saying you're loaning him the animal, but he no longer has the ability to sell it because he's making it an apoitiki. And like the Mishnah Berurah says, this sounds at face value like this is according to the first opinion in Sif Dalid that says that the Ein Yehudi does not have to have the ability to sell the animal in order to be considered the owner. Then the Mechaber takes it even a step further. Same deal, same arrangement. You're lending him your stake of the animal, yukra v'zoyla, full achrayus. But now, not only is the Ein Yehudi going to make the shar an apoitiki, he's going to make it a 100% bona fide mashkoin. He's making it collateral. You're lending it to him. You're lending him your stake in the animal. You're making it a $500 loan. The Ein Yehudi looks at you and says, I want you to sleep well at night, so I'm giving you collateral. Here's the animal. You take the animal into your rishus. You're holding the animal as collateral over the loan. And now give it to me so I could use it. What's the difference? It's a technical difference. The mashkoin, or in the words of the Mechaber, he called it Yaharhinem, and a Rahan, which is a Mashkan, the Ramah said. That entails a higher level of shibud. The Yisrael gets more of a grasp on the animal when you make it a mashkin than you make it an apoitiki. But the Mechaber says there are yesh batirim that says that this also works. So here's another eitzah. So far, what the Mechaber gave us over here, in the case of a Yid, a Yisrael, and an Eini Yehudi that own an animal together b'shutfis, and the Eini Yehudi wants to have unfettered use of the animal on Shabbos, the Mechaber told us really the way you should do this is you should buy the animal together with the Eini Yehudi in such a manner that you have no ownership of it on Shabbos. You didn't do that, you could lend him your stake in the animal. The first opinion is lend it to him, but also give him the right to sell it. Then we said, the Mechaber said there's a yesh matirim, that you could lend it to him even without the right to sell it. You could lend it to him and then have him make it an apoitiki or a mashkoin. So you lent it to him, and he accepted full achrayas, and he even accepted yukra v'zoyla, but he cannot sell it. Then the Mechaber gave us one more eitzah. The last eitzah that the Mechaber gave us is what the Mishnah Berurah is going to call Kabbalas Achrayas L'chud. Really, the last eitzah of the Mechaber is the same eitzah that the Mechaber gave in Sif Dalid in the case when it's the Yid's animal. And that is, the Eini Yehudi, in this case, your Shutif, he's going to take the animal on Shabbos. You're going to tell him, listen, Tony, the animal is by you on Shabbos, but you cannot do malacha with the animal on Shabbos. If you do malacha with the animal on Shabbos, you have to accept upon yourself full achrayas for the animal, that whatever happens to the animal, it's completely on you. You have to accept upon yourself yukra v'zoyla, that if there's a change in value, the change in value is going to accrue to you. And we're going to call in the attorneys, and we're going to write this up in a legal document so that there should be a pirsum, so that everybody should know about it, and there should be no chash marasayin, that people are going to see you doing malacha with my animal, and they're going to think that I was over on shvisas behemtoi. The key difference between this last eitzah and the ones before them, the eitzahs that came before this involved a halva. You were lending your chelik in the animal to the Eini Yehudi. The question was, exactly how much rights are you giving him? The first opinion was you're even giving him the right to sell it. Then we said, no, you don't have to lend it to him with the right to sell it. You could lend it to him and he could make it an apoitik or a mashkoin. The last eitzah, you're not lending it to him. It's yours. It's you own it together, b'shutfis. But what you're telling him is, you can't do malacha with it. What happens if he does do malacha? Oh, if he does do malacha, he's being makabel a very high degree of an achrayas, even yukra v'zayla, and therefore we consider it his animal, and you don't have a problem of shvisas behemtoi. That's the recap of what we've seen so far over here in Siman Reish Mem Vav, and now against that backdrop, let's see what the Ramah says to tie up the Siman here on Yonam at Bay's second line near the end of the line. Says the Ramah, Hagah. V'chol tzadei heterim elu, all of the various heterim, all of the various eitzes that the Mechaber gave us, that we just went through one by one, hilchasininu, they are all okay halacha l'maisa. They all work halacha l'maisa. V'yakalasa is ezamehan sheyirtze. You could do any of them. So, you own the animal, you could make a deal with an Eini Yehudi if he accepts a high degree of achrayas on the animal. If he accepts yukra v'zoyla, you could rent it to him, you could let him use it on Shabbos and do malacha with it on Shabbos. You have no problem with shvisas behemtoi, even though he doesn't have the right to sell it. You own an animal b'shutfis with an Eini Yehudi, you could even do the most kula dika eitzah of the Mechaber, which is the last one, that you tell him, listen, Tony, you can't do malacha with the animal on Shabbos. If you do, you have to be makabel full of achrayas on the animal, including yukra v'zoyla, and then you're absolved of any problem with shvisas behemtoi, despite the fact that he doesn't have the right to sell it. That's what the Mechaber says. You could do any of these eitzes. Now, the Ramah takes it even a step weiter. The Ramah says, not only can you use any of these eitzes, va'afilu im habehema kula shel Yisrael, even in the case where the Yid has 100% ownership of the animal, where the Yid is the sole owner of the animal. He's not a shutef with the Ein Yehudi. Dinoi ki'ilu haisa b'shutfes Ein Yehudi. It's the same halacha as a shutef. What does that mean? So you have to understand, when we're dealing with the problem of shvisas behemtai, it's much harder to be matir shvisas behemtai when the Yid has 100% ownership of the animal, against if the Yid is a shutef with the Ein Yehudi. When a Yid is a shutef with an Ein Yehudi in an animal, we already saw earlier a Beis Yosef who says that really, if a Yid is a shutef with an Ein Yehudi and the Ein Yehudi wants to use the animal on Shabbos, how could you say that there's a shvisas behemtai issue? How could the Yid prevent his shutef from using the animal? His shutef, the Ein Yehudi, has a 50% stake in the animal. How could you prohibit him from using the animal? He doesn't have an isser of shvisas behemtai. So right away, when you own an animal b'shutvis with an Ein Yehudi, there's a major mitigating factor when it comes to the problem of shvisas behemtai. Says the Ramah over here, you can use any of the different eitzes that we discussed today to get around shvisas behemtai, even when you are the sole owner of the animal. So let's put that in perspective. That means if Ruvain owns an animal 100%, he's the sole owner, and he wants to rent it out to Tony for a term that includes Shabbos, he could rent it out to Tony, and he could tell Tony, by the way, just one thing. You cannot do malacha. You can't use the animal. You cannot work the animal. You can't plow your field with this animal on Shabbos. Why? Because I have a shvisas behemtai issue. Should you do so, should you choose to go against the deal that we just made, and should you choose to go do malacha with the animal on Shabbos, you're going to accept on yourself full achrayus on the animal, including yukra v'zayla, and we're calling in the attorneys and we're writing this up in a legal document. Tony says yes, fine, no problem. You're absolved of any issue of shvisas behemtai. This is what the Ramah says, and he throws in one last caveat at the end, which is rak sheyafarsem she'asa derech heter. That is, in all of these cases, however you own the animal, if there is a situation where your animal is going to be by an Ein Yehudi on Shabbos, and there's a possibility that the Ein Yehudi is going to be doing malacha with your animal on Shabbos, you, besides making one of these deals, besides using one of these eitzes to make sure that there's no issue of shvisas behemtai, you have to publicize the fact that you made such a deal, so that everybody understands that it was done beheter, and there's no problem of marasayin. Okay, against this very lengthy backdrop, let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah is kat lamanav. Hilchas ininu. The Ramah said all of these different eitzes work halacha l'maisa. Right away jumps in the Chavetz Chaim, and the Chavetz Chaim says, while that is true, that you could use any of these eitzes, v'hayoser toiv shebachal ha'heterim, what is the best way to approach this? What is the best approach to deal with the Yisr of shvisas behemtai? Sheyakna oisam loy b'chol. You should be makneh your animal to the Ein Yehudi during the week. It should belong to the Ein Yehudi for the entire term of the rental or the borrowing. Yakna oisam loy b'chol b'mechira gemura. Use a real sale. Don't use any of these eitzes where you're lending it to him, he's being makabel achrayus. No. Sell the animal to the Ein Yehudi with a mechira gemura. That way he is the owner and you have no issue with shvisas behemtai. Now, and it's very important to pay attention to the details here, now the Mishnah Berurah describes what that sale is going to look like. You got to realize, the deal that you're doing with the Ein Yehudi doesn't want to buy your animal. He wants to rent your animal, or he wants to borrow your animal. He doesn't want to buy your animal. If he wanted to buy your animal, he'd buy an animal. If he bought your animal, there'd be no issue here, right? So what are you going to do? So the Mishnah Berurah says, I'll tell you what you're going to do. The first thing you're going to do is, you're going to place a dollar value on the animal. Tony comes, he wants to rent the animal. You're going to, Tony, what do you think this animal is worth? It's worth $1,000? Fine, it's worth $1,000. I have a Jewish law challenge. So for my purposes, for my Jewish law challenges, I know you're renting the animal from me. I need to sell you the animal so that the animal does not belong to me. Because if it belongs to me, I have Shabbos issues. It can't belong to me. So I need to sell it to you. What are we going to do? It's $1,000 animal. Could you pay me $1,000 now? No, you're not interested in paying $1,000. V'yiten loy oifgab al zeh. An oifgab is a deposit. What's going to happen is the Ein Yehudi is going to give you a deposit. So it's $1,000 animal. He's going to give you $50. He's going to give you a $50 deposit on your $1,000 animal. Now he owes you $950. The Yeser Adamim Yiskaf Alav B'milveh. The other $950 will be established as a loan. You owe me $950 as a loan. The Yasem Apoitikili Yisrael. Now the Ein Yehudi should make the animal an apoitiki. Sheyeh b'tuach b'maisav. And now Ruvain, the Yisrael, could sleep well at night. He knows he's going to get the value back from the animal. Okay, so what's the Mishnah Berurah saying? The Mishnah Berurah is saying we had all of these complicated machabers that gave us all of these complicated eitzes how to deal with the shvisas behemta issue. We have the Ramah. The Ramah says you could use any of them. They all work halacha l'maisa. Says the Chavetz Chaim, this is not really what you should do. Really what you should do is you should do a mechira gemura. Sell it to the Ein Yehudi so that it's not yours. Make it a mechira gemura, which means make sure that the Ein Yehudi makes proper kinyonim. Use kinyan kesef and kinyan meshicha. Make sure that he's the owner so that you are absolved of shvisas behemtoi. And he should make a payment. What's the payment? The $50 oifgab, the $50 deposit. What's with the other $950? It's a loan. How do you sleep well at night? The animal is an apaitiki. Continues the Mishnah Berurah and he says, and what would be proper would be, sheyase inyan hamechira b'fnei dayan ha'ir. Not only should you do this, but you should do it in front of the bezdin. Why? First of all, kedei sheyase kedin Torah. We want to know that everything is done properly. And also, v'gam sheyafursam hadavar shelo yechshash marasayin. We want also it should be done in front of bezdin, so that there should be a pirsum, and everybody should know that you did a proper mechira on your animal, and the Ein Yehudi that's doing malacha with your animal is kedasu kedin. It was done ba'ofen heter. Now we come to the next Mishnah Berurah. Now, before I read the next Mishnah Berurah to you, I want to point out to you that when we read this Mishnah Berurah, at face value, we're going to be confronted with a stira. We're going to be confronted with something that's very, very difficult to understand. Let's remember, in the Hakdama to this year, I pointed out that in Sif Dalid, the Mechaber presented us with a very fundamental machlokes. In Sif Dalid, the Mechaber told us, you own an animal, you want to rent out your animal to an Ein Yehudi, the Ein Yehudi is going to use it on Shabbos. There is one opinion that says, if the Ein Yehudi accepts tremendous achrayus over the animal, including Yukra V'Zoyla, he becomes the owner, you're absolved of shvisas behemtoi. But there was a Yesh Oimrim that said that does not work. Why? Because the Ein Yehudi cannot sell the animal. And since the Ein Yehudi doesn't have the right to sell it, he cannot be considered the owner. That's a very fundamental machlokes. In order for the Ein Yehudi to be considered the owner of the animal, does he have to have the right to sell the animal or not? Now that machlokes came up again in Sif Hey, because in Sif Hey we were talking about the Yisrael and the Ein Yehudi owning the animal b'shutvis. How do we get out of shvisas behemtoi? So first the Mechaber said, the Yisrael should lend his portion of the animal to the Ein Yehudi with a halva gemura. And the Mechaber said that halva gemura should include giving the Ein Yehudi the right to sell it. So when the Mechaber said that, he was clearly going like the Yesh Oimrim in Sif Dalid that said that the Ein Yehudi has to have the right to sell the animal. Then the Mechaber said, however, there are Yesh Matirim that say that no, he doesn't have to have the ability to sell it. Therefore, you could lend your portion to the Ein Yehudi. The Ein Yehudi could make the animal an apaitiki. Once he makes it an apaitiki, he can't sell it. Or he can make it a mashkoin. Once he makes it a mashkoin, he can't sell it. And still you're absolved of shvisas behemtoi. Why? Because the Ein Yehudi now becomes the owner, despite the fact that he can't sell it. So when the Mechaber presented that Yesh Matirim, he was going like the day of Rishona in Sif Daled, that says that the Ein Yehudi does not have to have the ability to sell it. Now, in Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Lamed Aleph that we just learned, the Mishnah Berurah told us, what's the best thing to do? A Mechira Gemura. What happens as part of that Mechira Gemura? The way the Mishnah Berurah described the Mechira Gemura, one step in the Mechira Gemura is that the Ein Yehudi is giving you a deposit, the rest of the value of the animal is a loan, and the Ein Yehudi makes the animal an apoitiki. Once he makes it an apoitiki, he no longer has the right to sell it. Bear that in mind, going now into Eis Katan Lamed Beis. Says the Mishnah Berurah Eis Katan Lamed Beis, Eza mehen sheyirtze va'afilu. The Ramah said, all of the eitzes presented by the Mechaber were halacha l'maisa. You could use any of the ones that you want, and you could use any of these eitzes, even in the case where the Yehudi is the sole owner of the animal, and he's not a partner with the Ein Yehudi. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Hainu da'af kabbalas achrayis b'lechud shekasav ha'mechaber l'b'seif dvarav mahani gam bozeh. Even the last eitzah of the Mechaber. What was the last eitzah? The last eitzah was, you allow the Ein Yehudi to take the animal for Shabbos. You don't make a loan. All you do is, you tell the Ein Yehudi, listen, you can't do malacha with the animal on Shabbos. If you choose to do malacha with the animal on Shabbos, you're being makabel full achrayus on the animal, including yukra v'zayla, and you write it up in a legal document. Says the Ramah, that eitzah works, even when you're 100% the owner of the animal. Af de ein lo rishus le'ein Yehudi l'machra. And this works despite the fact that using that eitzah, the Ein Yehudi is not going to have the ability to sell the animal. How would he have the ability to sell the animal? You didn't lend it to him. You didn't give him that rishus. All you did was, let's say you rented the animal to the Ein Yehudi for 6 weeks. You told him, by the way, there's a string attached. You can't do malacha. You can't plow your field with the animal on Shabbos. And should you choose to do so, you're makabel full achrayus on the animal, including yukra v'zayla. But you never gave him the ability to sell the animal. And yet the Ramah says, that works. Why? Kevin de medes b'rishu sayla inyan yukra v'zayla. It works because what the Ramah is telling you is, so long as the Ein Yehudi is makabel full achrayus on the animal, including yukra v'zayla, that makes him the owner in the context of the halacha of shvisas behemtai, and you are absolved of any concern of shvisas behemtai. Says the Mishnah Berurah, realize this sasam bozeh, when the Ramah writes this, it's very clear that he is accepting kedas hayesh matirin b'sif daled. He's paskening like the yesh matirin in sif daled that says that the Ein Yehudi does not have to have the right to sell the animal in order to be considered the owner and in order to absolve the Yisrael of any shvisas behemtai issues. But the Mishnah Berurah doesn't like that. The Mishnah Berurah is not happy with that. Says the Mishnah Berurah, the Yoser Toiv, it would be much better, sheyase mechira gemura v'chanal b'sif katan lamed aleph. What would be better? Pay close attention here, Rabbi Yisai, because this is where a steerer is going to jump off the page. Says the Mishnah Berurah, really what you should do is the mechira gemura that I described to you above in Eis Katan Lamed Aleph. And why should you do that? Why is that better, says the Mishnah Berurah? Kedei lotzeis gam das hamachmirin sham. In order to be machmir, like the Yesh Oyimrim in Sif Daled, that says that the Ein Yehudi must have the right to sell it. Ki l'divreim yesh bazech shash daraisa. Because we're dealing with a daraisa here, shvisas behemtai. If we have a Yesh Oimrim, by the way, very interesting, in some prints of the Mishnah Berurah, in Sif Daled, it doesn't say Yesh Oimrim, it says Yesh Oisrim. If we have a Yesh Oimrim, or a Yesh Oisrim, in Sif Daled, that says that you cannot get out of shvisas behemtai unless you transfer full ownership to the Ein Yehudi, to the extent that the Ein Yehudi has the ability to sell it, and we're dealing with a daraisa, we want to take that opinion into consideration. So says the Mishnah Berurah, what should you do? You should make a mechira gemura that gives the Ein Yehudi even the right to sell the animal out from under you without your permission. That way you yoitza even the Yesh Machmirin, the Yesh Omrim in Sif Daled. Okay, beautiful. What's the problem? The problem is that the Mishnah Berurah says, what deal should you use? You should use the deal that I described to you in Ois Katan Lamed Aleph. Now, the deal that the Mishnah Berurah described in Ois Katan Lamed Aleph has the Ein Yehudi making the shar an apoitiki. Once he makes the shar an apoitiki, he can't sell it. So what's the Mishnah Berurah telling me? The Mishnah Berurah is telling me, use the deal that I described in Ois Katan Lamed Aleph, whereby the Ein Yehudi is going to make the shar an apoitiki, whereby the Ein Yehudi cannot sell the shar, so that you should be Mekayim, the Yesh Oimrim in Sif Dalid, that says that the Ein Yehudi is not the owner of the shar unless he could sell it. How does that work? We have a blatant problem over here. Now, really, it should take another 45 minutes to answer this, but we don't have time. So I'm giving you the short answer. The short answer is that the Mishnah Berurah is following an opinion over here that says that when the Ein Yehudi makes the shar an apoitiki, that doesn't mean that he is subtracting from his ownership. See, there's two ways we could look at the phenomenon of apoitiki. We could look at the phenomenon of the apoitiki the way we did until now, which is, there's an opinion that says that the Ein Yehudi has to be able to sell the shar. If the Ein Yehudi makes the shar an apoitiki, he no longer has the ability to sell the shar. If he doesn't have the ability to sell the shar, that means his ownership is limited. If his ownership is limited, then according to the Yesh Oimrim in Sif Dalid, that's a poison pill in the deal. The Nakri doesn't have enough ownership in the animal. Why? Because his ownership is limited by the fact that he made it an apoitiki. Therefore, there's still a Shvisas Behemta issue. That's one way you could look at it. But you could look at it a second way. The second way you could look at it is the fact that the Ein Yehudi makes the shar an apoitiki. That doesn't limit his ownership. It doesn't lessen his ownership. I have full 100% ownership of the animal. I want you, Ruvain, to sleep at night and know that you're going to be able to collect the money that I owe you. So I'm showing you the shar, and I'm telling you that I'm making the shar an apoitiki. Okay? Look at the shar. You see I have this shar? Because I have this shar, and as the owner of this shar, I have the ability to pay back the loan from the shar, you could sleep at night. Why could you sleep at night? Because when you meet your friend on the street and he asks you, how do you sleep at night knowing that Tony owes you $950? You're going to answer, listen, I know that he has a $1,000 ox. I can always collect from the ox. Does that mean that Tony's ownership of the ox is any less? No. Matter of fact, if Tony wanted to sell it, the sale would be a binding sale. So the apoitiki is not limiting his ownership. The apoitiki only represents an agreement that he made to you in concept. It's a conceptual agreement that, look, I can always pay you from the shar, but it doesn't lessen the ownership. And that's why the Mishnah Berurah says over here, if you do the deal that I detailed to you in Ois Katan Lamed Aleph, you'll even be yotza the opinion of the Yesh Oimrim in Sif Dalid that says that even though Lamaisa, the Nakri is giving up his ability to sell because he's making it an apoitiki, it doesn't lessen his ownership. He's still the owner, and there's still no Shvisas Behemta issue. Okay, now let's go weiter over here. The rest of the Mishnah Berurah is relatively simple. Says the Mishnah Berurah, at the end of the day, when all the very, very complicated dust over here settles, let's say it's just too complicated for you to employ any of these eitzes that we've been learning about. And the truth is, it's very simple to understand that. You have a business whereby you have 100 head of cattle, and you make money by renting out your cattle to people who need to plow their fields. Tony comes to you and he wants to rent your animal. Once Tony starts to hear about all these complications, about what kind of achrayas he has to accept, and what the limitations are, and deposits, and loans, and yukra v'zoila, and everything else, what do I need this for? He's going to go down the block to the Ein Yehudi cattle renter, and he's going to rental agency, and he's going to rent from there. So says the Mishnah Berurah, if you simply cannot employ any of these heterim, and it's a shasatchak, you're under pressing circumstances, you need to be able to give your ox to the Ein Yehudi. Kigoin, for example, you have a landowner who has a lot of fields, and he's not a farmer. He gives out his fields ba'arisus. He gives his fields to sharecroppers, and the sharecroppers work the fields and they divvy up the yield. So Michi Yesh Sadis. Yehudi, he's not going to be able to give his field to a non-Jewish sharecropper. The way it was done was, you gave the sharecropper the field, but you also gave him the tractors. So I need to be able to give him the oxen to plow the fields with. And I can't do any of these deals where I'm going to make some kind of deal with him where he's not going to be able to do malacha with the shar on Shabbos, or I'm going to have him accept some kind of unusual level of achrayas. I can't do any of these things. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah, he brings us back to a bach that we learned about earlier in the Siman. Yesh lismay chaldas habach hanal. We could rely on the opinion of the Bach that we saw earlier. Shematir al yidei she'afkirein b'fnei shloisha kaidam haShabbos. He's matir that what you could do is you could be mafkir your animal in front of a bezdin. You could go in front of 3 people and say, my ox is by Tony. I'm being mafkir my ox. It's not mine anymore. Via fursam adavar, since you're doing it in front of 3 people, it's a bona fide hefker. Remember, we learned earlier that for a real, true, bona fide hefker should be done in front of 3 people. And it's mefursam. It's mefursam. It's done in front of 3 people. People are going to know about it. No one's going to be chayshid you for being over on Shvisas Bamtai, because they know Tony has your ox, but you are mafkirit. You're not really the owner. But v'hahefker tzarech liyos b'leiv shalem. It has to be a real hefker. You're really being mafkirit. And remember what the Ramah said. The Ramah said earlier, don't worry about being mafkirit in front of 3 people, because you're really being mafkirit. That means somebody else could come and take it. Who's going to take it? No one. They can only take it on Shabbos, because everybody understands that you're only being mafkirit for Shabbos. So they can only take it on Shabbos. And where is it? It's by the Ein Yehudi. The Ein Yehudi is not going to let anybody come and take it. So the Ramah said, don't be afraid to do this. So says the Mishnah Berurah, you're stuck, be mafkir your behemoth in front of 3 people. But we should only rely on this b'shas adchak. The Bach said you could do this even l'chatchila. But the Mishnah Berurah says no. We should only rely on this b'shas adchak. The Ramah says this also. In the Darkei Moshe on the Torah, the Ramah says straight out, in a Shas Adchak, you could be noyeg like the Bach, rent out your animal, give your animal to an Oris Ein Yehudi, be mafkir b'fnei shloisha, but you can only do this b'Shas Adchak. Ois kat lamed gimel, dinoi ki'ilu haisa, v'hinei, kol zehu kishem askira. Very important point that the Mishnah Berurah wants to make all the way here at the end of the Siman. V'hinei, kol zeh, this whole conversation that we're having, all these different teterim that are going to allow for you to allow an Ein Yehudi to do malacha with your behema on Shabbos. This only applies when you're renting the ox to the Ein Yehudi, or you're lending the ox to the Ein Yehudi, and the question is that he wants to do malacha with your ox for himself. He's doing malacha for his own purposes, to plow his own field. Avalasis Beleches Yisrael b'Shabbos, but to give your ox to an Ein Yehudi so that the Ein Yehudi could do work for you on Shabbos, ain't heter klal. None of these Ethereum would work, because now you would have an Amir Lakum problem. Even if you take your ox and you sell it to Tony, and Tony gives you $1,000, and his Kinyan Kesef, and he makes Bishicha, and everything else, and there's 3 people standing by, and it's before some Adavar, so what? How does that help you for Amir Lakum? Tony can't take the ox and go plow your field. That would be Amir Lakum. That would be also because of Amir Lakum 101. Therefore, says the Mishnah Berurah, let's say you have a scenario like this. Let's say a Yid has horses. And he has an employee that he has on retainer. A Yid is a big, landowner. He manages a lot of properties, and he has an employee, Tony. What's Tony's job? Tony is available to Ruvain around the clock to do anything that Tony needs. that Reuven needs. One day I need him to cut the grass. One day I need him to go deliver something to somebody. One day I need him for something else. But he's available to me for all malacha, for anything that I need. That's the type of employee he is. And I own horses. Ein heter b'mechiras hasusim loi. I cannot go ahead and Reuven, not me, Reuven cannot go ahead, sell one of his horses to his employee Tony, and then let Tony go use it to go do malacha for Reuven on Shabbos. The hare also loy lahanyak lasis malachtoi. Elim kein muska loy rak lemalacha zu lisa imasus b'lahelach leischar b'chaleis sheyitztarich b'shana zu. Remember what we said earlier. We said earlier when we were speaking about Amir La'akum back in Reish Mem Dalet. Reish Mem Gimel, actually. No, Reish Mem. All right, whatever. I think it was Reish Mem Dalet. We said over there, if a person has an employee on retainer, so let's say I have a tailor on retainer. Whenever I need a suit made, he makes a suit for me. He could make a suit for me on Shabbos, and there's no Amir La'akum problem. Why? Because Nachri Adaita did not shake of it. Why is he doing it on Shabbos? I didn't ask him to do it on Shabbos. I didn't tell him to do it on Shabbos. He's on a retainer for me for a year. Whatever tailoring work I need during the year, he's going to do for me. But I don't care when he does it. So he could do it even on Shabbos. But we said, if you have a retainer that's available to you, not just for tailoring, but for anything that you need, then he's not allowed to do malacha for you on Shabbos. Why? Because he's so beholden to you. There's so much malacha that you have for him to do that automatically by him doing malacha on Shabbos, you're benefiting. Because if he wouldn't perform some of your malacha on Shabbos, then it's very simple to understand he might not be available to you when you need him on a Sunday because he's busy catching up on the malacha, on the other malacha that he was doing for you. That's a malacha that we learned earlier. What the Mishnah Berurah is saying over here now is like this. If you have one of these types of employees who's on retainer for you for any kind of work that you need, so he's not allowed to work for you on Shabbos. Now you own a horse. You want to sell him your horse with a mechira gemura. But now he's going to use that horse to go make deliveries for your Amazon business. You can't do that because he's doing malacha for you on Shabbos, and that would be Amir La'akum. Unless, he says, he's not a retainer that's available to you for all malacha. Unless he's rak l'malacha zu. If he's like the tailor, if he's on retainer for you only for one thing, only to make deliveries, if he's on retainer for you that he's your delivery person, whenever you need deliveries, he does your deliveries, then according to the Shittas Rambam, according to the Shittas Rambam that we saw in Reish Mem Daled, if he's just your retainer to do your deliveries, you want to sell him a horse, and now he wants to do some of your deliveries on Shabbos, that would be okay, because he's a kablan. But of course, he wouldn't be allowed to tell him to make the delivery specifically on Shabbos. But if he chooses to do it on Shabbos, you wouldn't have to stop him. Okay, the final Mishnah Berurah over here, Rakshi Afarsim Adavar, all the way at the end of the Siman, the Ramah threw in a caveat, and that is whatever heter you use here for Shvisas Behemtoi, you have to make sure that it's Mufursim, so that there's no Marasayin. Ayin B'Bir Halacha Sheveinu, take a look in the Bir Halacha where we bring down the Ein Kedai Lahater Al Yedei Kol Heterim Elo B'Shas Hatchak. Says the Mishnah Berurah, we should only use any of these heterim, only b'shas chatchak. Ulafuke me elo anoshim. This stands in contrast to those people shemoichrim bekavana eshvareim le'ena Yehudi, who sell out their oxen to non-Jews, kedei sheyasa behen malacha b'Shabbos, knowing full well that malacha will be done with them on Shabbos. V'hamalacha nikreis al shem Yisrael, and everybody looks at that malacha as being done on behalf of a Yid. Even though we can't object, we can't protest to the people who do this because they have what to be samech on. Any Baal Nefesh should have concern for himself. He should only follow these heterim b'shas hatchak with the psak of a Talmid Chacham. Yisrael sheyesh lo sus. Let's say a Yid has a horse. Uba hamoishel hamakiroi. And now the Paritz, or the Moishel, the local ruler, who knows you comes lahashiloi to borrow your horse, or laskiroi, or to rent your horse for Shabbos, and you're stuck in a pickle. This very powerful Eina Yehudi wants to rent your horse or borrow your horse, and the term is going to include Shabbos, and you can't refuse him. Sell him the horse for a quarter, and then he could do with it whatever he wants. Let's say at the end of the term, this Moishel comes and he gives you back the animal, and he gives you back any money that you gave him. He gives back everything. Matana ba'alma yovle, we consider it to be just a matana, and you don't have to worry about it. Now, in closing, I just want to read to you, even though it's quite a bit past the time that I like to go, but I just want to read to you the end of the last Bir Halacha here on this siman, Bir Halacha Rakshi Afarsem Sha'asa Derech Heter, all the way at the end of the Bir Halacha. By me, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines up in the Bir Halacha. Says the Chavetz Chaim, Val Kain, Ein lahakal be'inyan zeh kol kach. You should not be makel of these inyanim. Kiyim b'shas hatchak, only b'shas hatchak. V'gam oz yirish yashtar osik yitin Torah al pi ras chacham u'bepirsim kamesh kasav Ramah. And now comes the punchline. V'habayteach b'Hashem, those that have true betachin in the Rebbeinu Shalom, u'mekayim ritzayin HaTorah, and they want to fulfill the ratzon of the Torah, the ratzon of Borei Olam. The laman yanuach sharcha v'chamerecha kipashte. They want to be mekayim what it says in the Aseres HaDibros. Laman yanuach sharcha v'chamerecha, without any kunsin. They want to be mekayim it kipashte. Ve'eno oisa shum tachbulus l'inyan Shabbos, and he doesn't make any kunsin to get around any of these Yisurin. Ashrav, he is fortunate. And based on this, it is certain that the Rebbeinu Shalom will give him tremendous hatzlacha in all of his parnasa, in all of his nechasim, b'sheishes yemei hamaisa. Rabbi say, if we have emunah and betachin in the Rebbeinu Shalom, we don't have to employ kunsin and shtiklach and heterim to figure out how to circumvent or go around Isurim, especially Isuri Daraisa, and Habitech B'Hashem, the Rebbeinu Shalom will take care of you. Thank you so much for joining me for limud HaTorah. This is limud HaTorah should be magna gans klal Yisrael. The Rebbeinu Shalom should send Yeshua's for first parnasa should do come to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Bias Gal Tzedek b'meher v'yameinu. Amen. Be well.